Uh, Put it on the agenda. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August 24th meeting of the Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee. I see that most of our members are present. I did get a message from Shauna yesterday that she was in transit and will try to be joining the meeting maybe a little late. But I think everybody else is here. So let us dive in. First up is minutes approval from our August 1st meeting. Is there somebody that would move that, please? Ann moves, Veronica seconds. Any discussion about the minutes? Okay, let's have a vote. Lee?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. So in just a minute, we're going to dive into the details. But before we do that, is there anything that anyone just wanted to ask a quick question or make a quick comment or anything like that before we dive in? About process or anything? Yes, Ann, go ahead.
It's not about process. I sent out a couple of comments. I think I can say them while we're going through the process. But one thing overall was I didn't see anything that said Tompkins County entities. So just
Right. We'll make sure that question gets addressed. I did see your email this morning. I printed it out, in fact, and I'm taking notes on it. So yes, we will make sure we get that, all the points that you raised, we'll make sure we get those answered, okay? Anything else before we dive in?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just to follow up with Ann. So you mean Tompkins County, meaning departments or agencies?
Veronica has shown me on packet page 12 types of projects. Funding can be used for projects located in or providing services, to organize businesses of Tompkins County. So it is mentioned once.
I mean, yeah, we'll make sure we address it even further.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's some other stuff there. Deborah.
Yeah, I think that issue may be implicit, at least in the fact that we're using ARPA funds, and the ARPA funds regulations require us to use our funds for services that serve our residents. Is that not correct?
Well, since we are discussing it, I'm going to send it over to Tracy. So Tracy, the question is it explicit in there that these grants go to entities located in Tompkins County and or providing services in Tompkins County?
I think it is.
Yes, so it really defines that these services need to be provided in Tompkins County, or if it's like a construction project that needs to happen in Tompkins County. There would be an opportunity for like a regional organization under the current guidelines to apply to provide services within Tompkins County. So that would leave open the opportunity for someone that might be an organization that is located in a different county to apply for the purpose of serving Tompkins County. So that's the way it's written right now.
So Habitat for Humanity, headquartered in Cortland County, could propose building a house in Tompkins County.
Correct.
Ann?
Thank you. So I've been talking to various organizations, since our last meeting and trying to get their sense of what we have laid out here and what MRB has helped us to lay out too. And it seems that a lot of organizations, or most, are not either providing services or 100% to people in this county. They're not, unlike county government. For instance, they might be located just outside of the county, but mostly providing services or customer bases in this county. So just something that we can talk about some more. Same thing as like EMS I mentioned in my email.
So Ann, I'm sorry, you're suggesting that there are some organizations that mostly would serve Tompkins County, but might leak into other counties, and how do we deal with that? Is that your question, or?
Right. For instance, the entity that, bought the Barton Boy Scout camp just north of Trumansburg in another county, but yet they're mostly going to serve, we think, people in Tompkins County. But
Tracy, do you want to try to address that, like that example as a jumping off point for the discussion?
So what I've seen in other programs of this nature is that they do require that the organization specify how they'll ensure that these funds will benefit residents or businesses or organizations of Tompkins County. So, I mean, under that guideline, I would say an application like that, assuming that's what this group wants to do, would have to say, okay, we're going to fund this program for the camp and provide scholarships to Tompkins County residents and be able to document that that money is only going to Tompkins County residents.
I'll just add, this is Mike Lindolo from MRB. You'll note that the project scoring is heavily dependent on meeting program guidelines. And so I think that's where we would probably also capture some of that, which is to say, the extent to which they've shown they would have a positive impact on those priorities would be tied to the extent that they're going to serve Tompkins County residents and businesses and organizations. So I think there's a couple ways we get that. I think, although I do think that maybe we can just add some language in the program priorities that those things are specific to Tompkins County, and that should help clarify.
Thank you. Deborah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's an old hand.
All that. Okay. And did that get close enough to answering your questions? Were you concerned?
yeah, I think we can talk about it more when we talk about municipalities like EMS, fire,
Okay.
or food pantries even.
Okay. We will definitely talk
Thank
about
you.
it. So don't let us get lost on that. So let's see, I had written a couple of things down that maybe is under next steps. I think we're ready to dive in. Tracy,
Great.
want to take us away?
Sure. Let me pop some information up here. So thanks for having us back. We're glad to be here. And, today we're going to go over the updates to the guidelines that we've made since the last time you saw them. Just really quickly, we'll talk about the draft application and instructions, a little bit of an update on what we're planning for program promotion, and then go over next steps. So just to get started, I think this is where we can talk about some of those questions that you have, because this is where we're really going to talk about the guidelines. But just to quickly go over the changes that we made since the last meeting, throughout the document, we did reduce and clarify the use of the word program, because there were places that was confusing, looking at it again and getting that feedback. So that was done. We also updated the program name and acronym throughout to reflect the selected name of Tompkins Community Recovery Fund. Within the program process and timelines, we added the monthly committee meetings and added language to indicate that additional rounds may become available. On the eligible applicants, we specified educational institutions with annual budgets under $200 million. That seems to have aligned with the county's budget, which I think is the feedback that we got last month. So that would allow the smaller institutions to apply to the program. And then we also excluded, this is pretty common for programs of this nature. I added an exclusionary language for applicants with outstanding local, state, and federal taxes or obligations. Most community programs, a lot of communities, if someone hasn't paid their taxes, that's a disqualifying factor. Under eligible activities, we clarified that the nonprofit activities apply to the other non-business types of applicants. And we added projects that support the public health response, which is a clear item in the final rule and didn't make it into the first round of guidelines. Project selection, we outlined that review and approval process in greater depth and added that projects may be awarded less than the requested amount. So that gives the group the opportunity if, there's a project that you want to fund, but maybe not the level they ask for, you can make those decisions, and that's outlined specifically in the guidelines. And then finally, we clarified the language around the grant disbursement process, saying that it would be reimbursement, but that a waiver would be available for upfront funding under certain circumstances. So those are the really substantive. There are a few other kind of wording changes, but those are the substantive updates. But if we want to talk about eligible applicants now, that would probably be a good time. Now's a good time to have that conversation.
Great. Then let us have that conversation. So the only question I heard raised about eligible applicants had to do with municipalities. So before we dive into that one, was there any other category of eligibility that anybody wanted to talk about? Veronica?
Oh, I just had a question for why applicant or potential applicants with tax obligations outstanding are not allowed to apply.
That's more or less a best practice for these kinds of projects. And we specifically state in the instructions that, you know, someone that maybe has back taxes but are on a current agreement to pay those, that's fine, as long as they're up to date and current and they've made that arrangement with the appropriate municipality. But generally speaking, a lot of, and maybe this isn't the case for Tompkins County, but a lot of municipalities don't necessarily want to reward a behavior like not paying your taxes by providing grant funding.
Okay.
I'm sorry, were you still going, Veronica?
No, that makes sense. So just to clarify, if an organization like is behind on their taxes, but they're like they have an agreement to catch up and are already working on that separately from these funds.
Yes.
That's okay. Okay.
Yeah. So if they've reached out to the comptroller and they have a payment arrangement and they're current on that arrangement, we consider that current.
Kind of a follow-up to that. I'm just wondering how you even get into a verification process, or is it just an affirmation that they're signing that they don't have outstanding obligations, or an explanation if they do?
Yeah.
You can go a lot of directions with back taxes. You know, it could go sales tax, income tax, property tax, utilities. God only knows.
Yeah, we ask in the application and they affirm in the application that they don't have any outstanding taxes. Generally speaking, we're going to accept their word for that. The county may want to look at least their property tax to make sure none of these organizations have any liens on property taxes specifically. But we're not going to go reaching out to the state on every application to make sure sales tax is up to date or whatnot. So there might be some level of local verification, but generally speaking, we're going to have them certify that they do not have outstanding liabilities.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Joan?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, that's not a requirement from the federal government for this program. That would be our choice to do that. Thank you.
Correct.
Ann?
Thank you. So regarding municipal entities, just wondering if what folks thought about that, as we wanted to clarify that. For instance, in my district, I looked at, for instance, fire and EMS, and in my district, one of them is municipal owned, one of them is nonprofit. So for instance, if we took out municipal altogether, only one of those fire and EMS would be eligible. So for instance, my thinking and, my first response would be, municipal EMS, fire and EMS, and for instance, maybe youth programs or something like that, like to be really specific. For instance, otherwise, if we leave it open, is it they want to build a new highway barn? Not saying that I'm totally against that, but I just want us to think about, or they want to buy all new furniture for other municipal buildings. So just want to have a discussion on that.
So just to back it off slightly, the question is, how do we feel about municipalities who have also already received their own ARPA money? How do we want to treat them? And then Ann was pointing out some of the nuances, right? There's some fire companies that are municipal, some aren't, et cetera. Okay, further discussion. Joan, is your hand still up? Was that an old hand? Old hand, okay.
So one thing to keep in mind is that the now biggest portion of the scoring is program alignment. And this group will have the opportunity to make decisions about how relevant applications are to your priorities. So if someone's looking to put furniture into a municipal building, you might say that doesn't really align with the program priorities, and that would significantly affect the scoring for that project. So that's one way to look at it. If you don't want to get into the nitty gritty of trying to define specific types of projects that are available or allowed for municipalities. But certainly if there are a select few that you're interested in, you could do that.
Deborah.
Yeah, I was wondering what our philosophy is going to be with this. I mean, if we want to allow the maximum number of people to be eligible to apply and cast a broad net, it doesn't necessarily mean that we, just because they're eligible to apply for something, that we're going to give them a grant. I mean, they still have to meet the scoring criteria, as Tracy's just pointed out. So I don't know. I guess the committee needs to decide whether they want to put the restrictions up front or want to exercise them later as part of the selection process.
Lee.
Couple thoughts on the municipalities question. And I don't know if there's a way to put some language in there, but it may be that the towns and the villages have certainly identified for the most part where they're going to spend, or maybe they're going through a similar exercise now because they've got a couple of years to do it. Maybe something could be said that we're for funding for programs they were unable to fund through their ARPA programs. And I don't know how you would word it. The other, and I am interested in the fire and EMS aspect, and going back to our conversation a little bit earlier about county entities being able to apply. And something that may be of assistance to those is that if you had a joint application or a number of departments that applied under an umbrella of, say, the Department of Emergency Response for some similar priority. And I'm thinking off the top of my head, radio replacements, extremely expensive. And one of the things they're most concerned about is something they all should be doing and keeping at the same level. Maybe that's a way to approach that a joint application under some entity that serves multiple municipal and or nonprofit based organizations, so they could have a coordinated application. Maybe that's something that we could have the flexibility to do.
Deborah, is your hand still up? It's okay. All right, I'm going to take a turn. I thought about this.
One of those radios.
One of those radios. I thought about this a lot. We were provided, Joan provided us a nice list of how much ARPA funding each of the towns had received already. This was a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. So I've been thinking about this a lot. And here's where what I've been thinking is, yes, if a municipality has received $300,000 in ARPA funding and hasn't spent any of it, and then asks us for money, then yeah, I don't think I would give that much weight. I would say, why aren't you using your own money? But I could also imagine that there's a new fire station needs to be built in some part of the county that's not covered. Just making this up, of course. It costs $1 million to build, and they'll use all their ARPA money, and they're asking for more of ours. That's a application that I would give a lot of weight to. Like, I wouldn't hold that, just the fact that they had received it already, against them. So that's where I've been thinking about, is like, it depends on each case. And I further thought that the simplest thing to do is not to try to change the guidelines, that let them apply. And if they ask for furniture for their city hall, for the town hall, we'll probably just reject that application. Or if they ask for something that we think is worthwhile, we'll be able to do it as part of the application process. I think putting it into the guidelines would be, I think we might not be able to take into account every situation that we're trying to take into account. So that's where I've come out on it, that it's really good information to have, and we should have that information with us as we review the applications. That information being how much ARPA money they've already received. and how they've spent it, but it's not automatically disqualifying, in my opinion. That's where I've come to with this. Other thoughts? Ann?
I'm just thinking of, wasting. I do like the idea, I've talked to organizations, because some of them said, well, you're not very specific in certain things. What do you think? What did you guys mean by that? And I said, well, part of it was we wanted to make it more broad, at least for some of us, we thought we want to make it more broad because a lot of organizations fall through the cracks of a lot of grants are very specific. And so they're not eligible for those things. So part of it wanted to make it more broad, but we do provide, some examples, like our program priorities. And so maybe if we're talking about, say, municipalities, maybe we want to relook at that to say for municipalities, or look at the priorities. Does that, align with things that municipalities would do? Or would that be a slightly different, some example, again, well, you could say a priorities, because if we don't put anything, just thinking, I don't want to go back and say, well, let's ask for extra information that's not required. Let's ask about, and that's a good example. I would favor something like that. I like that idea of, oh, they used part of their ARPA funds or all of their ARPA funds for their new whatever, fire EMS building, and they needed a little bit more, and we could help with that. But if we don't have that in the criteria or priorities or something like that, it leaves a lot of discretion. And I'd like to take more of the discretion out from us because it could be seen as being unfair if we ask for additional information. So for instance, again, for municipalities, we could say priorities, because we do have some things that say align with our program as part of, I think, the criteria. So it aligns with our program priorities. I think it says something like that. So we could say expanding water and sewer, fire and EMS, youth services, or come up with some of our priorities to steer them in the right direction. And then that would give us teeth later on, and that would help them to focus on, hey, the things we're not looking for is and again, this is just an example. I'm not saying, if everybody else thinks differently, but we're not going to do, a $2 million highway building or an all new snow trucks or.
So I'm not opposed to trying to do that language. However, it would be good for us to try to stay on schedule here, meaning it would be good for us to have our final approval today of the guidelines so that we can get them to the full legislature first meeting in September, so that we can actually launch the process. So my only concern is if we need to wordsmith too much and we can't approve it today, it really sets us back. That's my only concern. I would be willing to accept the language you just said if other people think that doesn't create other problems, if that fits in with what we're talking about. Joan.
I'm wondering if it would be better to ask in the application for entities that received over, and I don't know what dollar figure to pluck out of the air, but let's say $100,000 that received more than $100,000 in funding already, to explain how that funding was used. At this point, we merely ask how much to determine a point value, but we don't really ask how they spent that money. It's just a way to get at it in a simple change today rather than trying to craft specific language.
So add a question to the application that says, if you've received ARPA money already, please explain how you used it. Is that more or less what you just said? Yeah. Okay. Michael.
I don't want to get too in the weeds about this, but my understanding from my experience with other municipalities below the county level is that most of them use the carve out related to revenue recovery for their allocation of ARPA funds. So at the level of which your villages and towns receive funding, they could under the treasury ruling, they could automatically include up to $10 million of revenue replacement without having to actually document loss of revenue. So I don't think that we're going to get any additional information if we ask them how they used it, because I believe most of them just said this is revenue replacement money.
Can I ask a question on that? Michael, with some of those municipalities, I'm trying to think how it worked with our area. It seems as though the award went to the town and there was a carve out or a mandated part they had to give to the village. They didn't specifically do it. I think it was like for Groton, for an example, kind of following up on Joan in the 100,000 number. And I know that was one that was floated. It was like 600,000 for the township, and of that there was a little over 200,000 that had to be shifted to the village, so it ended up being like 400 and 200. But those are, you know, two of the smaller municipalities, so that might give you a scope of give the committee a scope of what was awarded to the entities.
Danby got about 300,000. Caroline got about 300,000. Quite a few of the small, mid-sized ones in the county got in that range.
I think the town, our town, for instance, and I don't know how they did it, whether I think they may have done just what Michael just said, was put it into revenue recovery, but ultimately I think they ended up spending a good share of it on a salt storage facility jointly with the village. And that's kind of where some of this has gone out in the smaller towns to tackle some of those infrastructure projects that they couldn't handle. And so their ability to go to other entities probably was very limited.
Deborah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the village of Lansing, we got somewhere between 350 and 400,000, and we put it into a road project and a sewer project. So yeah, I think a lot of villages and towns probably just used it on infrastructure. But I don't know. I'm not opposed to asking them what they used it for. If they say they used it for government operations under that carve out, so be it.
So Ann, if we added that question to the application, would that start to approach your addressing some of your concerns, or would you want to go a little further and make those list those program priorities for municipalities?
It's, from what I'm hearing, to me, the information about ARPA, what they did with their ARPA funds, and just want to say, I know at least one municipality is offering grants to the community with their ARPA funds, one of the smaller municipalities. So I guess I'm not as concerned about that. It's saying, you know, giving them some priorities, because we know municipalities do a variety of things. So I would like to give them some guidance.
Tracy, how hard would it be to insert a phrase under the municipal section that says, you know, along the lines of what Ann's saying, we would favor priorities, program priorities such as childcare, fire EMS,
Youth programs,
Youth
that would
programs.
cover more things, youth services, for instance.
can you, I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Can you find a place that would fit in pretty easily?
Yeah, so there's a section called types of projects, which I think is what you're referring to, Ann, is,
Back at page 12.
yep. And it lists out in bullets, childcare, daycare, public health, mental health, affordable housing. We could add a bullet here that is specific to municipalities to say, you know, fire, EMS, youth programs. Are those the kind of big ones you're thinking?
And water sewer projects.
Water sewer?
That's
I would think that any of the broadband projects are probably going to come through a municipality as well, because it's not going to generally be a nonprofit that does that. So maybe I'll move that to the municipal section as well.
Well, broadband could also come from an actual company too, right?
It could. The application currently only allows companies with up to 100 employees to apply. So anything coming from a company that's bigger than that would have to come through a partner organization of some sort.
Okay, so it sounds like that gets you 90% of where you wanted to get to, Ann. Do you agree with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Tracy, that feels good. It feels like you can get that in there and doesn't create any more problems? Any new
No,
problems?
I'm just, like I said, I'm just gonna add a bullet to the project types of projects for municipal or municipal guidance, I'll call it, and include those particular items.
Everybody on the committee good with this solution? Thumbs up. Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, Tracy, back to you. Back to your list.
So, yes. Share. Okay. So that brings us through our notable updates and on to the scoring criteria. Specifically, this is where we landed. The alignment for program priorities, we increased to a total of up to 25 points. This is where your group is going to have a lot of flexibility to make decisions about how well a project aligns. And it is the largest portion of the score. So this is where you'll have some discretion to make those kinds of decisions. There are a few other items that you'll also have some discretion about how well a project fits or an organization is doing on a scoring criteria, but that's going to be the big one for you. We updated various point values to make things add to a reasonable number. And then we added 2 new metrics, the high level of need. So this is a question we added to the application, and we added to the scoring criteria for organizations that demonstrate need for the project or for the funding, as well as a metric around the number of employees that an organization has. This was brought up at the last meeting as something to, give the smaller organizations maybe a little bit of a leg up. So that was added in as well. And then we removed the unmet need metric because it's duplicative of the priority alignment. So this is where we landed. It is 70 points. And, I think there's some areas that are very black and white. It's going to be, okay, you have so many employees, these are your points. But there are a few questions you'll have a little bit of flexibility to decide what makes sense for the program. So open to any additional comments on the scoring.
Yes, Veronica.
Not about the scoring system itself, but how do we feel about including the scoring criteria in the application instructions?
We could add those to the instructions. We can just pull the whole table over.
What do others think?
Fine. I can't see everybody on the screen. If there's anyone on the screen, anyone zooming in.
I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I mean, it's no big, it shouldn't be a big secret as to how we're scoring. So that's fine.
All of the applicants will, have access to the guidelines. We want them to read the guidelines. We want them to understand the priorities so that they fill out their application in consideration of priorities. So they'll have the scoring guidelines either way.
Lisa?
I agree with that. I think that applicants should be able to build their applications accordingly.
Shauna Black has joined us. Hello, Shauna.
Hi, Dan. Thanks. Sorry, I'm late in attendance. I wanted to see, will people be able to see their scores? Is this something that we're going to be able to show applicants?
Michael, do you have an opinion on this? I've done it both ways.
Yes. So right now we have in our selection process, we outline the steps of the selection process. And so just a refresher on that, what we'll do to help facilitate this discussion is the consultant team will do some preliminary scoring, right? Not just straw man, right? This is kind of where things come in. The committee is going to make adjustments to that scoring criteria and come up with their final list. So by virtue of the fact that us discussing that at a public meeting and having a scoring criteria that we agree to, that will become a public document. So either we can just publish it and just say, here it is, or we could use it and, respond to FOIL requests. I'm fine with either. I just think it's going to be a public discussion anyhow, so they're going to know if they want to.
Great. Okay, Tracy, keep us going.
Okay, so the application itself, it includes all of these aspects. You had a chance to look at it. There's one update we made since you've seen it, and that was just adding Norma in as the contact if someone wants to submit a hard copy. We slotted Norma's name in there. She can receive those and scan those over to us as needed. And then obviously we will add the web page link to this once it's available, but that's a non-substantive change. The way this is built out is that there's an application form. It's not a terribly long application form, but it does get us all the things we need for scoring. And then there's addendums for projects of larger sizes to be able to do a little more scrutiny in the underwriting and scoring process for projects that are requesting more money. Any question on that? Great.
We have one, Ann.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to go over this again, but just going back to broadband, and if they're limited, because that's a huge priority for the county, broadband expansion. And if we're limiting to organizations that only have 100 employees or less, I'm just wondering if we'd like to reconsider that, because that, to me, that's really important. If we could have anybody come forward to help fill in gaps, and I get calls all the time.
And you're suggesting if Spectrum wanted to apply for a grant, we should consider that.
I mean, myself, I'd prefer smaller companies, but I know there's at least one in this county. There's one just outside of the county. I have no idea how many employees they have. And I know they subcontract to do certain work, like to lay some lines and things like that. So I don't know.
Tracy, do you feel like, there was some mentioned earlier, if in that situation, they would need a local sponsor, like a municipality or not-for-profit to propose. So that partially addresses it, but that doesn't totally address it.
Right. So basically the idea would be that anything that doesn't fit the eligibility criteria would need a fiscal sponsor, either a nonprofit or a municipal, like an LDC or an IDA or some sort of a fiscal sponsor to, actually, I don't know that an IDA could necessarily do this that way, but there would need to be a fiscal sponsor involved for that instance, which I don't think is unusual either, by the way.
Lee, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going to ask the question, is maybe a municipality would take a lead, because you'd want it to know if you were going to have funding going to a large entity, that they're addressing a local priority in the process. So some kind of a partnership with someone. We would want to know that the municipality sees this broadband area as a priority for being funded.
So would that not be seen as too cumbersome or for that to happen? I just don't want to put barriers that would preclude them being able to do it. So I don't know.
In my experience with these kinds of projects, the companies often tend to be pretty practiced at this. And oftentimes what a fiscal sponsor will do is say to the company, look, these are the requirements for reporting. You need to make sure that you get us what we need to do the reporting in order for you to get the money. And they put a lot of that onus onto the company, despite being the fiscal sponsor. So for a small municipality, like a village or a small town, that might be a lot. But for a more regional organization, it might not be as big of an issue.
So, Ann, if we were to try to address this, I mean, might you be suggesting a carve out, for saying we would, this is wording, we would consider an application from a broadband provider of greater than 100 employees?
Right. Because I don't know what I don't know. So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe other people know, but I would hate it to say, well, that's too cumbersome. I'm not going to go through that when otherwise we could have some people, get more service.
And are there any other categories that we might want to consider somebody, an employer with more than 100 employees? A business with more than 100?
I'll give you an example, and this may fall differently because of the nonprofit status, but I can think of some of our healthcare agencies that are right at that 100 limit with FTEs that are true nonprofits that are really among the priorities that we've been looking at.
Well, if they are not-for-profits, then they do not meet, there is no employee
limit.
number. Yeah, it's just for
Okay.
private businesses.
So private businesses. Boy, that's a tough one.
Healthcare providers are also called out specifically as an eligible applicant outside of the business category.
Okay, so even a private healthcare business with more than 100 employees is eligible.
Right.
So a Cayuga Medical Center, for example, if they had some community project that,
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's what you're saying, right, Tracy? Our local hospital, that certainly has more than 100 employees. Okay. So we're already doing a carve out for some industries. We could have just add broadband if that's the desire. Deborah doesn't like it though. Go ahead, Deborah.
Well, I just don't want to make some general expansion of the ability for one possible use. I'm just not in favor of using our money for big business. That's all. So I would be against that.
Anybody else have an opinion on this? I'll tell you what, let's put this question to the side for now and we'll take it up a little later in the meeting. Give us a little more time to draw on. I know it's not a lot of time, but because I can certainly see both sides of this one. So help me remember at the end if I'm about to end the meeting and say, wait, we didn't do that one. Okay, Tracy, back to you.
So the application instructions, again, we added in Norma's name here, and we fixed one typo, but otherwise it's what you saw. Another thing that we were talking about this morning was actually adding to this a review deadline so that it would give us consultants appropriate time to respond to inquiries that are coming ahead of the deadline, especially if we want to keep this moving quickly. It would be an optional review to say, if you would like to ensure that you can get feedback from the consultant team prior to submitting your final application, please get it to us by October 15. After that, we will try to get you feedback, but we can't guarantee it, and your application would be as submitted at that point. And that would just outline an ability for us to not have to run too far over the deadline. So that's something we were talking about adding here, just underneath the application support section, to outline the expectations that, if you submit on October 31st and it's an incomplete application, you might not get that feedback to be able to submit additional information. And then basically these guides or these instructions just provide more information about what we're looking for in the application.
So you're suggesting that there would be like a kind of a dual deadline, and October 15th is to guarantee that you'll be able to get back to them in time for them to resubmit. October 31st, the hard deadline.
Correct.
Hey, I just want to say something before we continue with this part of the conversation, that I have been saying out loud that after today, the grant process is launched. And that turned out not to be true. I was incorrect. It still has to go to the legislature for final approval. So really, the official launching, we probably be, assuming we say yes today and yes on the first September meeting at the legislature, the official launch then is really like September 8th. So I just wanted to be, I wanted to be aware of that as we talk about what the actual deadline at the other end is. Okay, I see a couple of hands up. Joan.
Thank you. I am concerned about the deadline and how it fits into the county process. If the deadline remains October 31st, the next meeting of this committee would be November 7th, which does not leave enough lead time to get material to the committee in a timely fashion. which means it would be a December coming through this committee, which would make it tough to get through the legislature, I think, in the timeline you're anticipating. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't care what the deadline is, but.
Thank you, Joan. We were going to get to this one at the next steps stage of the agenda. We just had a little flurry of email activity suggesting that we're going to need to add some November meetings if we want to, of this committee, if we want to really take some time with all the applications and get them processed in the timeline that we have laid out right now. So that's exactly what you were pointing out, and we will get to that particular part of it in a little while. Shauna, did you have your hand up? It was up, then down.
I had it up, but my question was answered. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ann.
Thank you. I think this is a good a time as any to bring up that again, as I've talked to numerous organizations and businesses in the community, I heard a lot of feedback about asking for 2 tranches of funds and application periods, because the larger organizations that are, which there are, I mean, there was a couple that I talked with. I'm sure there are numerous ones in the county that are watching this in real time, and they're all ready to go. And then there are a lot of organizations, businesses, municipalities probably don't know much about this at all. I haven't talked to any municipality that knows they're even mentioned in this. So we're going to get, I think, more of the shovel-ready, bigger organizations, or for some reason that they got clued into this, that I got one organization that asked me to come over just to clarify various, very minute things in this. So they've been watching this, and then other organizations, entities have no clue. And I think we're going to generate a lot of, information out to the community, but still a lot of it is going to be word of mouth, or also, for instance, nonprofits, they meet once a month generally. So if they're going to be eligible for this, it's going to take them a few months, say, for a project, or to get estimates and things like that, or to get permission. And so I would like, or some organizations, small businesses said, I'm going to see who gets before I waste my time. I'm so busy trying to get employees that I'm not going to apply until I see that actually other people are getting money. So I would like us to consider somehow splitting it up for another tranche, 4 to 6 months at least, minimal later, so that we are really meeting our goals of getting out into the smaller organizations. Could be really impactful. We talked about small businesses as a priority. We need to give them more time, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thoughts on that? Veronica.
I would be in favor of that, generally agreeing with Annie.
So, Ann, let me ask you a few more questions. I know you're not, you don't have to have the final answer, but are you suggesting, like, say we're giving out 4 million now and 2 million later, like an actual dollar amount that we're limiting ourselves to?
Yes.
Lee.
I get where you're coming from, Ann. We're headed into Labor Day, and a lot of organizations haven't been meeting, and to get something from September into October and be in the process is, for smaller organizations, going to be a tough handle. The other thing is I'm just kind of thinking about our evaluation process, and I, as much as anybody, want to see us get it out the door as soon as we can. And we're going to be spending all of October, as will the municipalities, on finalizing budgets. And then when we talk about that November 7th time, well, that's about the time we're ready to adopt here. So we're putting a lot on the plate there for 6 or 8 weeks. And a lot of pressure on those smaller organizations or even the municipalities that may have an interest. That's kind of October, November is a tough time for everybody. Even the nonprofits, that's when they're doing their budgets.
Okay, we've got Tracy and then Shauna.
So I just wanted to add that during the RFP process, there was a clarification that was sent out. And the legislature had identified kind of groupings of amounts of grants that they wanted to award. Like 10 to 25,000, 25,000 to 250,000. And you preliminarily kind of said, this is how much we want to give in each group. So that could provide you some opportunity if you get a lot of the bigger applications up front to say, you know what, we're not going to take this right now. You know, we'll open another round to try to get some of those smaller applications and reconsider this at that point. So that's something that you've already kind of set the stage for, to be able to ensure that you have those smaller awards and opportunities for smaller organizations. So I just wanted to remind you of that structure that you've already laid out.
Shauna.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy and Annie. I think there can be some compromise in regards to that, and have the majority of the funding go out in the first tranche. And then, as Tracy mentioned, maybe save, a portion of the smaller grants to go out in the second. I also wanted to, and I know, Dan, I don't know how amenable you are to bringing up different topics, but I think it's important for us to talk about legislators' roles in this process, because I want to make sure that we don't have necessarily like legislators intervening here so much that they're pushing a certain application through. I understand that's sometimes what we do during the budget process. We try and support, we all have kind of our favorite nonprofits. But I think at this point, in order to allow for an equal distribution of the funds and an equal process for everyone applying, it might be best to have our nonprofits go directly through the process and help our consultants. If they have questions, everything should be funneled towards the consultant, so that we don't have this becoming a little bit more political than it should be.
Okay, Shauna, I'm just writing that down, and we'll put that to the side for now, and we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Still working on the tranche question. It's a funny word, right? Lisa.
Just have a question. If we were to consider more than one tranche, would an agency who applied in the first round and was not funded, would they be able to apply again? Something for consideration.
To me, that's one of the benefits of having more than one tranche. That we've seen that before with Community Housing Development Fund, with tourism grants, things like that, and other grants we've done through the planning department, that they do more research, they redo their project, they figure out maybe there was something that, for instance, we wanted more matching funds, for instance, that gives them time to go get those matching funds so I think that actually is a benefit, and to letting them apply a second time. And they might not, for various reasons, they might not have all their ducks in a row or enough information. And so enough preparation. I would like us to consider, being very specific about having a second tranche where we take out, for instance, half to, you suggested, maybe 1/3, for instance, what 1/3 to 1/2 that we save for the second one, so that they know that too. And again, the more specific we are here, the less, and I do like that is what was said, the more that our consultants are vetting this and are clear on this criteria as well as others, then it leaves it leaves less discretion to the legislators, again, so that we're not being either seen or, of course, trying to get our projects and our pet projects or projects in our district, for instance. So I like to have as much criteria. That's why I mentioned before about, saying what the municipal priorities are.
Well, I'll take a turn. I prefer not to do 2 tranches. If we do it, we do it. That's fine. It's not that big a deal. But for one thing, we literally launched this program 1 year ago. And there's been quite a bit of publicity about it. And organizations have had a lot of time to hear about it and think about it. I personally have been talking about it every opportunity I get in my towns, to my town boards, my town newsletters, trying to prime the pumps to get people thinking. And every time of year is busy, and I don't know. I think we should just do it finally. But like I say, if it's the will of the group that we go with 2 tranches, then let's do it. We do have to recognize that we now need to employ our consultant longer and pay them more. That's also one, side effect of that. I got Deborah and then Kate.
Yeah, I think we're getting lost in the weeds. And it's going to cost us in terms of time and efficiency. I agree with everything you just said, Dan. People have had lots of lead time to get ready for this. We have repeatedly said we want to get this money out the door as quickly as possible. And every time we try to do a carve out or make an exception or create a rule that gives, a specific population of potential applicants a leg up, we create another source of delay. So I think, as Tracy pointed out, we're not foreclosed under the current proposal from doing more than 1 round of applications. And that gives us enough leeway without having to make some specific provision for a second tranche. So I'm really not in favor of going that route. Thanks.
Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I don't, whether you guys do 1 or 2 tranches, that's your prerogative in that. But I do think it's important to note that while some people are educated about this, I've had several nonprofits call me and ask me what I know and asking for more details. And so there may be a need to do some sort of public education around that in a different push or a different way. And so if you do want, just know that I think that there's still a lot of confusion, especially for people who don't pay attention to these sort of things, or don't understand how it might fit in. And I don't know if that's a public service announcement. I know we've done a number of things, but I think we want to make sure that we are doing some targeted marketing to the populations that we're trying to hit. And Dominic, I see you do that. So just to throw that out there.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. We are in this very meeting. We're going to hear about some of the marketing plan, and it's a good one. And Dominic, do you have your hand up already? You're welcome to start.
It's going to be covered, so I'll hold back. Didn't realize it was in the presentation already, but yes, thank you, Kate. I agree. More to be done generally, and I think you'll see that here.
Okay, committee members, I'm going to boil it back down to you. How do we want to? Oh, Veronica, you have something?
Yeah, just briefly responding to what Deborah said. I think we can do a second tranche if we need to. Definitely gives us a bunch of flexibility, but it does not necessarily give the applying application I'm so sorry. It does not necessarily give potential applicants flexibility in deciding, do I need to panic, get something together this month, or can we do it better for later? And so I think we should just be mindful of that as we decide.
Shauna?
Yeah, I'm all for leaving it as it is, since we do have that flexibility. And now that I've heard from Dan and Deborah, it does make sense. I think we're getting in the weeds, and we don't need to make this any more complicated than it already is. So I would support leaving it the way that it is.
Okay, committee members, I think unless someone has another idea, I think we have to just take a little vote and see what happens. I don't know how else to decide this right now. Veronica.
Can we do that vote after we hear about the planned program promotion? Because that seems relevant.
Sure. Committee members, all good on that? Okay, let me keep writing my notes here. Okay, now we still had another question that we had not resolved, which was the proposal to make sort of on October 15th, sort of a soft deadline, October 31st, hard deadline, for lack of a better term right now. How do people feel about that? Or is that too tied into the other questions to be able to answer?
Fine with me.
Okay, that was Deborah,
Fine with me.
Veronica.
That's good.
Okay, I think we have consensus on this one. So just to be clear again, Tracy, it would be worded in such a way of something like, the real deadline is October 31st, but if you want to make sure you have time to get feedback on your application, you'll need to get it in early. Is that the thrust of the message?
Yeah, I can actually, I drafted it this morning. So basically I have written here, we encourage but do not require that applicants work with the consulting team to ensure applications are complete upon submission. Applicants that submit a draft application and materials to the consulting team prior to October 15th can be guaranteed consultant feedback and an opportunity to make edits or additions prior to the October 31st application deadline. Applicants who choose not to take advantage of this review will only receive feedback ahead of the deadline as capacity allows.
I think that's, Deborah says yes. I also agree. That says it well. That's conveys the message well. Any last thoughts about that before we move on? Okay. For Tracy, I think we're back to you.
Yes. Okay, so we had a project management call yesterday morning with the core team and Dominic and Eric from our team, who is our marketing manager, to talk about program promotion, because we really want to be ready to hit the ground running as soon as the legislature approves the guidelines and keep the project moving. So there's kind of two different elements here to the promotion plan that we're starting to put together. One is getting the word out, like telling people that this program exists, and then getting the information out. Where is all that information going to live and how are people going to find it? So, in terms of getting the word out, we're going to have a lot of resources for social media. Dominic mentioned that there are a lot of email newsletter distribution lists that we can tie into, including a distribution list for folks that are interested in COVID programs and this program in particular. So there's already a built-in interest for that we can reach out to. And also working with strategic partners in order to get the word out through their networks. So working with chambers and economic development organizations to reach small businesses, and working with the Human Services Coalition to get the word out to nonprofits. And, we can work with those kinds of strategic organizations to help get the word out through their social media, their websites, their newsletters, their personal connections. And then in terms of having the information, there would the plan is to have a web page specifically for this program on the Tompkins County site. And Dominic mentioned that we can put on the homepage, there's a slider at the top. We can put an image and some wording about the program in that slider on the homepage, as well as a quick link. I think it's in the side right bar to direct people to that page. We also want to make sure that the link is easy so we can share it and talk about it, and everybody can just say, here's the link, without having to have a bunch of letters and random punctuation in the middle. So making sure that there's a good link for that site. We'll also have a number of application sessions or information sessions. So already we have a session scheduled with the Human Services Coalition to talk to their membership about this program and the application process, but we'll also do at least one, if not two, additional information sessions. And we'll make sure that we have at least one recorded so that video can go onto the website, the web page, with all of the other information. We also have drafted some one-page overviews for specific types of applicants to kind of boil things down and give them the overview before they start digging into a 12-page program guideline document. It's just a little overwhelming. So obviously we want there to be kind of an easy thing to look at prior to them digging in if they're not sure if they're a good fit. So we're working on all of those pieces now. And we're going to be looking at building up an email list ahead of the launch of the program, so that as soon as those guidelines are approved, we can send it out to the list, and anyone who's said, hey, I'm interested or signed up for this newsletter can get those documents right away and be pointed to the website. So there's a number of different ways that we're looking to do outreach and communication about the program, as well as to share information and support to potential applicants.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was in on that discussion about promotion, and in my opinion, based on the resources and experience that our consultants have, and based on the local resources we have, Dominic and all the rest of us that know the local landscape so well, I'm really confident that this is going to reach all the corners of the county that it needs to. Okay, other discussion about the promotion plan.
Just that I'm impressed. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
And Dominic.
Dominic knows many things, is what I've come to understand.
We're lucky to have him.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And so also you hinted at this, but I'll say it my way, and you tell me if this is the wrong way to say it. That coming soon, like any day, there would be a message going out letting people know this program is coming soon, and that we would start gathering contact information that anybody that wanted to sign up for that newsletter or notifications, so that the moment the guidelines are final, anyone that's signed up over the next 2 weeks will automatically get them. Is that about right?
Yeah. Dan, can I add one or two just brief notes on the newsletter piece?
Yes, please.
Excuse me. One is that just under 900 people are signed up for the newsletter about this particular program right now. And combing through that list, it is a lot of nonprofit and small business individuals. I can tell by the email addresses or whatever that's where they're from. So that's a pretty great group so far, and I do anticipate that growing. Every time in the legislature highlights that I write, I've linked to it. So that's where a majority of those signups have come from. The second piece is, and I know that you've talked a lot about small businesses being a priority today, and I want to just share that we do have a significant number of small businesses that we can reach out to through a similar listserv for those businesses that we've kept. And that listserv is built off of the businesses who had to close and reopen during the worst of COVID-19. So that's the specific group that we'll be able to market towards. So I feel very confident in those lists and our ability to grow them. But I just wanted to share that there are, just south of 900 people who've expressed specific interest in this program so far. And then additionally, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 business representatives are in those other lists. So it's a pretty solid group, I think, that we have as a baseline. I just wanted to share those numbers with you.
Thank you. Veronica.
Just briefly, I'm one of those just south of 900, so I guess that's not helpful. But during this meeting, I received my personal email an announcement of that HSC info session, free and open to the public. Email looks great. And for anyone watching who wants to know, like, how can I do this? Dominic can tell you, but just go to tompkinscountyny.gov. If you're not signed up for government alerts, it will ask you if you want to be. So do that. You can choose recovery fund as a topic and stay up to date.
Okay. Any last thoughts about the promotion piece of it? Okay, so it was requested that after we have the promotion piece that we go back to the tranche question. So now we've had the promotion piece. And where I thought we had gotten with the tranche question was basically now we have to choose, we have to decide one or two. It's kind of a easier choice than some of the things we do. So I propose we could do a straight ahead vote, but unless there's another way to think about it, I'm open to that.
I'm good with that.
Okay, let's have a vote then. I know this is not the way we usually do it. And we can do a roll call if we need to, but how about this? Please raise your hand if you think one tranche is the way to go. So that's Dan, Veronica, Shauna, and Deborah. Did I capture that right? Okay, thank you. Raise your hand if you think two tranches are necessary or desirable. Anne and Lee. Okay. Brittany, I'm going to put you on the spot. Was that a parliamentarily acceptable way to proceed, or should we? Yeah. Okay, thank you. It's not a resolution, so not a motion.
I'm okay with the majority goes that way. And I feel better after hearing the promotional aspects of it.
Very good.
And I do continue to hear the words flexibility here. So, okay.
Very good. Okay, well, thanks. That was good. That was good discussion. All right. We'll get to next steps in a minute. There was one other piece from that last discussion that we hadn't resolved yet, which was the broadband carve out for greater than 100 employees, for businesses that have greater than 100 employees. How do you want to resolve that one? Should we just do a straight ahead vote on that as well? Ann?
Can I just add one thing? If we're going to do the carve out for broadband, is you're considering that, I was just thinking of hearing some of the discussions for expansion that what I've heard is, for instance, if one company is already in a certain area or looking to already expand in a certain area or add additional service, it's much easier for them to fill in those little areas that they might maybe otherwise couldn't afford with a little extra help versus some other company coming in and trying to get that area because their lines are already, spider webbed in an area. And again, it's easier for them to do that. So I don't know the population or the number of employees but I just think it's such a big priority. We have this money. I would like us to consider carve out just for broadband. I mean, would I prefer local companies? Yes. But I know, for instance, on a mile block where I am, there's Spectrum on either side and they're not down that mile in between.
I have Deborah, then Lee.
I'm a little confused about this emphasis on broadband because isn't it the case that there are other federal and state grant programs that support broadband? I mean, do we really want to be jiggering this program around specifically to accommodate broadband?
I asked Nick Humboldt from planning, and he said, anytime we can expand it from this program, he would like it to be included.
Lee?
Kind of looking at you as a broadband expert there, Dan. Does the county still have a list of underserved areas or priority areas where we'd like to see it go that where private industry hasn't been able to afford to go there yet? I don't know that any of that's been updated since the broadband committee was really in swing.
So yes, Ann's committee is reviewing this stuff right now. I can give the summary or you can, whatever you'd like, about what our current effort is.
Go ahead. You're talking
Okay.
about the consultants.
I just read the memo yesterday, so I'm fresh on it. Basically, we are undergoing another countywide planning process, hiring a consultant to get the best map that we currently have to show where everything is and isn't covered, and then take us a few steps further than that even of how to close those gaps. Is that a pretty good summary?
I was thinking there was an answer there, but you may not have that map by November 1st. And even if you had the flexibility to just say, regardless of the size of the company, if the application is geared toward an underserved area identified by the county and broadband expansion to those areas has been a priority of the county for years, there's the flexibility there to work with it, regardless of who builds it.
Right. So you're saying maybe consider putting in even a further qualifier that if it meets our county plan for expansion, something like that? Okay. Veronica.
I think I'm really glad we're talking about broadband because it is important, but I think if it is such a high priority, and as others have mentioned, there's federal funding and we're still in data collection mode, I would think it makes more sense to tackle broadband expansion directly as a county through, not through the recovery fund, but through, going after some of these other funds, and instead of trying to like lay the perfect trap for a company to see that this is the opportunity to come up with a plan in the next 2 months. If they do have a great plan, I guess I'm against the carve out. I would think, maybe this is naive, and I guess if you have more than 100 employees, you probably have the resources to find yourself a fiscal sponsor to take advantage of this program anyway.
Tracy, I wanted to ask you, putting on the spot a little bit again. I think you can handle it though. If we wanted to do this kind of carve out similar to the one that we have for healthcare, is that easily insertable into the guidelines?
I would add right where healthcare providers are listed as eligible applicants, I would just add another bullet that says broadband providers.
Okay, I'm going to say that I'm going to vote yes for this because it doesn't hurt. I have a feeling it would not be taken advantage of, but it doesn't hurt. And the thing about, yes, there are enormous state and federal resources available, but they are not easy to access and they are years away from implementation. That's just the reality of it. It's just because of the size of the bureaucracies at the state and the federal government. So I'll just put one more little thing. We have from time to time found little opportunities to plug holes here and there in the county's broadband network. The most recent one was something this county legislature did where we allocated $75,000 and it was combined with some other funding, and we were able to, if I recall correctly, provide access to 175 homes in Newfield that didn't have broadband up to that time. So there's an example of just like a carve out, really. It was like a one-time thing and it didn't fit in with any of our other plans, but it fell in our lap. We did it. And those 175 houses are probably very glad we did it. So I would vote yes, just to give us, just in case that this helps plug some gap that we don't know about. So that's my little speech. Any last thoughts before we take a little vote? Okay, so the question is carve out or no carve out? Everyone in favor of carve out, raise your hand. That is Lee, Ann, and Dan. Everyone, again, no carve out, please raise your hand. That is Deborah, Veronica, and Shauna. Whoa, we have the tie. Okay, that does not pass the carve out at this time, and we're gonna keep going. Okay, how about we go to the next item on the agenda, which is the next steps. I think that's where we're at. And by the way, it's 10 to 12, just for time check.
So real quick, I actually moved this slide so we'd have more time to talk about the carve out and the second round. But I do want to make sure that we address approval of the documents. So here on the visual is basically, we are going to make these look prettier. We're designing them. And so this is just kind of a sneak peek of where we are right now with the design of the guidelines, and then the application instructions would follow kind of a similar design. But I just want you all to know that they're going to look nicer by the time they hit the community and probably by the time they hit the legislature. So we're working on that now. And we do want to make sure that everyone understands that part of the guidelines is that the county or that administrative updates to the guidelines can be made without prior notice. And one thing that we're taking from that is we just want everyone to be aware that once this is all approved, if there's a minor technical or administrative fix that needs to be made, like we missed a typo or there's a question in the application that's confusing people, we just need to reword it a little bit. What we would like to do is make sure that we as consultants and the county staff have the opportunity to do that without having to run it through a month-long process. So we're taking that wording to also include those technical administrative updates. This would not be changes to the priorities, changes to scoring, anything substantive in terms of what you hope the program to be. It's really just if there's clarifications that need to be made for the betterment of the program, then we'll go ahead and make those updates to the documents. So the documents you have, the changes that we've made is we added the review deadline language and the addition of the municipal project types. So if everyone is on board with all those changes that we've discussed, I think we could be ready to talk about the approval of the documents. Dan, do you want to talk about next steps first? Or
So the approving the documents, approving the application guidelines and application is the resolution itself, right?
yes, you want to do that at the end?
Yeah, I think that that'd be the way to go.
Okay.
So why don't we go ahead in the next steps?
Michael has his hand up.
Yeah, Michael, go
Okay,
ahead.
sorry, I can't see him. Yep, go ahead, please, Michael.
I just wanted to say, there was one other minor amendment based on Annie's comment earlier on. We're just going to clarify, we're going to add language to clarify that we're looking specifically at impacts to residents and businesses and organizations in Tompkins County. So that's just a clarification. I want to make sure that that gets in the notes. So
Thank you. That was probably the easiest thing we decided on all day.
Okay, so next steps, we will finalize the design of the guidelines. It'll go to the legislature for approval for the guidelines, application, and instructions. We'll start program promotion, collecting those email addresses, and once the approval is done, really push out all of the information and get working with partners. And, once that approval happens by the legislature, we can open the application round. The application will go out, people can start working on it. And through that process of the application round being open, we as consultants will meet with potential applicants, we'll provide technical assistance, we'll do the pre-submission review. And then once the round closes, we'll do the preliminary scoring to help you with the process of review. So once that closes, one thing we'll need to talk about is the logistics of the review with an October 31st deadline to get recommendations to the legislature for their December meeting. We're really going to need to have a good amount of time set aside if this group wants to review each application and discuss each application as part of these meetings. So first of all, November 7th isn't going to work. To Joan's point earlier, there's just not enough time to get you sufficient information to have substantive conversations at that September 7th meeting. So we'd recommend pushing back to at least probably the 14th, but then we'll also want to make sure that we have perhaps up to three-hour meetings on the calendar in those 2 weeks of the 14th and before Thanksgiving to make sure that there's enough time to review all of the applications and finalize the scoring and get them to the legislature. If we don't need all of those meetings or all of that time, great, we'll not do it all, but I think having it on the calendar would be helpful.
Okay, so what we're asking committee members and everybody else is, can we commit to schedule permitting, of course, to do quite a bit of meeting in the middle of November, this committee, to really work through all the applications and leave ourselves enough time to do that.
If we have to.
Okay. Ann.
You're saying that we would have to have three-hour meetings to go through all the applications?
That is the proposal. Yep. Up to three-hour meetings. Yeah. Just like our OTR meetings, we'll go through as many as we can in the amount of time we have.
That would be in
Mid-November.
mid-November.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Do what we have to do.
Say that again, please.
I just said, we'll do what we have to do.
Okay. That will be our crunch time. Yeah. I mean, the alternative is that we bleed into December, and that means that the awards don't go out till, late January, something like that. It's not a tragedy, but we kind of had it in mind to try to get them out by the first of the year. If we can't, we can't. Veronica, did you want to say something or not really?
Oh, just,
You're kind of,
I'll do my best, but
you have a job.
I have another job and going to the Facing Race conference right in the middle of that time, but we'll try.
All right, we will work on that scheduling process outside of this meeting. We'll do some emailing about that and see what we can come up with. Very good. Was there anything else in next steps, or did that cover it all?
That's it for now.
Very good, thank you. Okay, then we are up to voting on the resolution, unless there's any other business that needs to get done before we vote on that resolution. Okay, so the resolution is on packet page 5. And all it says is, we've gone through this process already, and that we, the committee, are accepting these guidelines today, recommending that the legislature does so. They'll do so on September, I think it's 6th. We'll vote on it. If the full legislature passes, then let's use the date of September 8th that we can start actually doing the business of this grant process. So would somebody move the resolution, please? Lee, was that a move? Thank you. And Veronica's seconding. Oh, sorry, Deborah, I missed you up there. Discussion about the resolution. Okay, let's have a roll call vote. Deborah,
Yes.
Shauna,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Veronica,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That's unanimous. Very good. It is 4 minutes to noon. There was the item that Shauna brought up, which is, I'm going to guess, would be a big discussion about the legislator's role in this process. Let's just keep that on the table just for one more minute. Is there any other business to do before this committee?
Just a thank you to MRB.
Yeah, I want to add that thank you. I think you've done a really good job at listening to our feedback and incorporating it into the document like spectacularly. So thank you for doing that. Shauna.
And I just want to thank you. You've done a wonderful job chairing this committee. It's a difficult one because it's something that we're not used to doing, but you've done great. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Shauna, I don't know if you want to open that can of worms or if you just want to make another brief statement, if anybody wants to weigh in on this topic, or if should we just put it off to another meeting, or should this be an email discussion? I'm open to how you want to do it. Committee members, what do you want to do? The topic is legislator roles in this process and how, should we be limiting ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. Deborah.
I'm not sure necessarily that this is a question for the committee. I think that Shauna as chair can send out an email, a general instruction to the legislators. This was never supposed to be a political process. Last year, we saw what kind of problems could arise when certain people who were then members of the committee went out and about in the community and started making representations and pushing for particular results. It wasn't pretty. And I think that experience in and of itself establishes a good enough reason for why we should just all step back and let the consultants do the work that we hired them to do.
Other thoughts? I actually agree. I think Shauna, it was your topic and you're the chair. I would be in favor of write us a little essay or whatever, a couple of paragraphs expressing what you had in mind, send it to all the legislators, And, some other legislators might have different ideas and might respond to you, but this is not the kind of thing we would be voting on probably anyway. That's my thought.
Okay, yeah, and I'm happy to do that. I don't want this to be something where a legislator mentors or supports. I mean, we're going to do that in our voting, but I don't think it's fair to all of the nonprofits that are applying for this for legislators to push their own agendas. So I want to make that very clear, and I will do so in an email also that goes out. I think MRB is going to do a great job for us, and it remains very neutral whenever we do that. And I'm happy to write that email this afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you. Ann.
I'm just thinking about this topic and, at the, excuse me, at the recent HHS meeting, the Child Care Council did a presentation basically about how they're going to apply for this grant and what they want to do with it. And I would suggest that that be off limits from now on, because I mean, I could, with my committee, I could fill that up with, and have different organizations come and use my committee for that. And I mean, if somebody wanted, any organization, any entity wanted to come to speak at any committee or legislative privilege of the floor to say, hey, this thing is going to be coming through, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable to me. But to be having a place where any committee or legislative meeting where they're coming and doing presentations, I think that should be off limits, or I think we should at least talk about that. Is that okay? Because that might give, kind of saying that, hey, we're going to be, even though that's identified area that we do want to support, but just want to be fair. And as much as, that's why I was a little bit, thinking about, 9 hours of us going through it. My hope is that, putting them on the spot, MRB does such a great job of giving us recommendations that we go, okay, this looks great. Yeah. And that legislators have to do less of the deciding.
Deborah?
So Annie, I mean, what I take away from what you just said is that we do not want to have any of our committee meetings providing a lobbying platform for applicants to press their case about why their particular application should be approved. And if that's your point, I totally agree. This should not be like our budget meetings where departments come in and basically lobby for the budget and the OTRs that they need.
Right.
Okay.
Lee?
I see a two-step process in some sense where the legislature should have an involvement, or legislators. And let me take it in reverse order. The evaluation process is pretty much there. MRB is going to package this and do some initial scoring, and the committee will do what they have to do. But at this point in time, I think it's part of our role to get out and push and help get the word out and make sure that some of the priorities that we've been looking for are going to see applications going into the evaluation process. So, and I don't want to make that look like there's a conflict or that we're particularly pushing for some program, but if any of us have ideas about meritorious projects that might be out there, well, we got a couple of weeks to get them thinking about it and moving forward. And I don't want to be silent at this point. This has been something we've been promising the community, and legislators may well be involved to some degree to ensure that there are applications coming in.
I'll take a quick turn. This is not the first time this topic's come up. There's definitely different ways to look at it. Because of my involvement in this committee, I've had the opportunity to talk to a couple of funders in this county, people that give out grants, and that was really helpful to me because I don't have a ton of experience in giving out grants prior to this. And I asked them that question and I was actually what I heard was surprised me, which was, no, it's perfect. It's more than okay. It's actually a good thing to be involved in cultivating organizations to apply for grants. You may not promise them anything. That's the one rule you cannot break. But other than that, it's okay to, it's more than okay. It's actually good practice to like be cultivating organizations. So I know that can mean a lot of different things to different people and the style you do it and et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to throw that perspective in there too.
I just don't want this to turn into earmarks or pork barrel, I would like us as a body, the committee and the legislature as a whole, to be making decisions on the relative merits of the applications, and not because you have some personal investment where you've gone out and solicited an application from a particular organization so that you have, I don't know, a personal agenda, a personal investment. I don't know. I guess it's a fine line to walk.
Great. Okay, so Shauna's going to send out her email, and then there might be some responses to that. All the legislators will be involved in that discussion.
And just to be clear, I think there's a fine line between getting the information out, maybe calling a nonprofit and say, just to give you the heads up, here's where we're moving, and also mentoring them in the application process. And I also, I do see a need for us not to allow those that are going for these funds to come in and speak at committee meetings. I think that's really important. Everyone really needs equal eartime and airtime whenever it comes to promoting and filling out this application.
Okay, any other thoughts today on this topic? Okay, was there anything I didn't cover? I know there was a bunch of things that we said we'd get to. I think we got to them all. Any other business today? All right, well, thank you again, everybody. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.